Hey everybody, so this is going to be an introduction to assignment 7, which will be our context elevations assignment. So the goal here is that we're going to create elevations of the neighboring buildings for the third project in Studio, the large public pool. Our ultimate goal is over this week and next is to create a digital site context that we can then build models in and build our designs into, so that we can not only understand our own designs, but how they relate to context. So in order to do this, we're going to use a series of operations that includes bringing photographs of the buildings into Photoshop, straightening them out so that they make a approximation of an elevation, and then bringing that in as a reference into Rhino to draft a 2D elevation on top of this. From there, we'll need to scale this elevation using a combination of the provided CAD data that has good estimates of widths using the property boundaries, as well as using Google Earth Pro to get approximate heights of these buildings. Ultimately, you'll create a series of elevations. Each should have a minimum of 3 line weights. This will be the sort of heaviest line on the outside, a medium line weight, which will be for internal cutouts such as windows, and a lighter line that will just be sort of details on the building. The goal is to draw as much of the detail of the building as possible, and this is in part to sort of replicate the process that you would go through if you were trying to create elevations for laser cutting out. So the way we're going to draft these things is try to always use closed polylines, or at least continuous polylines whenever possible, as a sort of good practice as what you want to do when you're actually drafting for the purpose of laser cutting. So this is something I'll go through in the demo. And ultimately the output will be just combining the image that you see on the left, so the altered Photoshop image, and the image you see on the right, the drafted version of that, into a single page of 11 by 17 for each of the assigned elevations. So each student will receive a series of elevations that are marked on a plan. You'll need to go in and find the corresponding photos that document that building, and then bring them into Photoshop to straighten them, and then ultimately into Rhino to draft them up. So although everyone has a separate building, they're been grouped together in order to sort of be approximately the same amount of sort of work complexity and general level of detail between each of the separate groupings of buildings. You'll want to talk with your GA in order to figure out the assignments. So each of you will have one of these. For sections that have fewer students, so I believe the section with the smallest number of students is 13 actually, you'll just do building groupings 1 through 13. If you have more students, I believe we are up to 17 in the largest section, you'll do 1 through 17. Those extra ones, if you are in a smaller group, will just not be done. They are sort of further away from the site and less important. So I tried to strategically place the most important elevations in the first 13 groupings. You'll also want to include things like the curb, a ground line, any vegetation. So if there are trees in front of your building, include them as, just use a generic CAD block or something like that. And then ultimately you'll just produce a multi-page PDF with each of your assigned elevations. Next week we'll take these and make these into 3-dimensional models, but for the first week, all we are really focused on is the elevations and getting good line weights out of them. So there is a second page to this assignment, which just goes over the photography process. So in this case, we're going to be providing all the photography for you, since some of you are not in Cincinnati. But the usual circumstance is that with assignments like this and in normal studios, you will be documenting the neighboring buildings yourself. So a good practice is always avoid, when trying to make elevations, shooting buildings at angles. You really want to aim to shoot buildings as straight on as possible, as that will give you the best outcome. So both of these photos at the top were straightened to the best of my abilities in Photoshop. You can see below the building that is at a steep angle really doesn't come out very well. This isn't a great reference in order to create a drafted elevation. I might be able to, but it certainly wouldn't be nearly as accurate or nearly as detailed as the version on the right, which again was taken with a much more straight-on photograph. So, as I said, the photographs for you are provided, so you won't have this issue necessarily, although some of them are going to vary in quality. Some of the buildings don't necessarily have all their sides easily accessible from public space, so you'll have to sort of make do with what's there. It can be a good idea, though, to try to get onto, say, Google Earth and drive around the general area and see if you can find your specific buildings, as looking at them from different angles will also help you in the drafting process and figure out the sort of lacking or missing detail from the photographs that are provided. But hopefully, most of the photographs will work pretty well for you. Okay, so the next thing is the assignments. So this is a general map of the site and all the buildings surrounding it. So as you can see here, each of these buildings that are color-coded are given a number. So whoever is assigned, for example, number 1 here, which is directly next to the site, will be responsible for each of the facades seen in the photographs. So that's the back facade, the side facade, and the 2 fronts. Number 2 will take, again, the facades shown here. And number 3, so these kind of jump around a bit. So number 3 actually has 2 different plots. You can see they have this building here as well as this. This was done simply because the way buildings split up wasn't always perfectly equal, so I had to sort of split things a little bit all over the place sometimes in order to make sure the assignments were as equivalent as possible for each unit. Number 4 is here, number 5 jumps down here, number 6, 7, 8. 8 is another split one, so you have 2 building facades here and 2 up here. And let's see where's number 9 is here. Number 10 right here. 11 is this building, which has a fairly lengthy facade. Number 12 is this single building, but has 4 sides to it. 13 is here. 14 is another split one. 2 simple buildings. 15 is, I think I skipped over it. Oh, right here. 3 simple facades in a row. None of the sides of these buildings are accessible, so they don't need to be drafted. 16 is this larger building here at the corner of Central Parkway and Liberty. And number 17 is down here, which has a sort of simple side building facade and a building facade on Ray Street, as well as the little convenience store / cell phone store here. So, of course, the photography in the buildings are going to vary dramatically in how you'll have to adjust them. And in certain circumstances, you may find that trees are obscuring your view. And in those circumstances, you'll just have to try to use what you can see of the building to try to make as accurate of an elevation as possible. Trees are often in the way, as are cars, and it's just sort of a consequence of documenting a building in an urban context. These things exist. So with that, I'm going to end the introduction. So look for the demo to see the process. All right, thank you.